Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Never in doubt, eh? Wow. There was one point I asked someone towards the end of the first half last night in Coventry whether they were going to pop down at half time just to get a hot drink or something. And they replied, I'm not going to say who it was, but they replied, I might just go down and see if there's 2 spoons so that I can gouge my eyes out and not have to watch another half of that, which pretty much was very brutally graphic, but summed up exactly what that game was like. That was just awful. It was awful, but somehow Spurs are through in the Carabao Cup. Probably one of the worst performances you'll ever see from a Tottenham side that ended in a victory. We've seen a lot of those. All those ones I've said before, they ended up losing. Yet somehow they have ripped this out of Coventry's hands right at the end of the game. I did kind of feel sorry for their fans. The fans were great throughout the game. At the, it's not called the Rico anymore. It's called the Coventry Building Society Arena, the snappily named title. But the people I most felt sorry though for, because that's where my loyalties lie, are the travelling Tottenham fans. Other than that little experience at the end, oh my goodness, they must have been thinking, we've got most of us, because the trains were a bit tricky to get back later, so most people would have driven. So you're looking at 2 hours back, getting back in the early hours after that. Spurs were just horrendous for long periods. They had 70% of the possession, didn't matter. 582 passes, didn't matter. They just had no idea what to do with the ball. Honestly, they just would build up, and just... We spoke a little bit about this against Arsenal, but this was 100 times worse. And this was against a team, with no disrespect to Coventry. They're in the Championship, and they're not a bad side by any stretch of the imagination. They've only won 1 game, though, in the Championship in the first 5 so far. So, they had certain threats that Spurs had to deal with, but come on. Tottenham should be going there, even with 8 changes, and not playing like that. Not playing with that lack of... You can maybe argue behind the lack of fluency and fluidity because these players are being thrown together for the first time. And yes, this will benefit them going forward. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But come on, that was just dreadful. I was watching Jamie Donnelly playing for Orient against Brentford the night before. And so much of the stuff he was doing, I was like, now in hindsight, it's like, I know he's got to be at Orient and playing, but my goodness, he was playing so many fast, progressive passes, creative balls between the lines, setting people away. And you just kind of thought, had he started in that lineup, I think Spurs have less problem. And I know that's pinning a lot on, was he 19 years old? But I actually think he was that good against Premier League opposition in Brentford. I think he would have made a huge difference. But it is better what he's doing, I think, the loan move. But they were just so awful. They were just so awful until those final minutes when it was almost like they realised what they were meant to do. Coventry had 15 shots at goal to Spurs 9. Spurs, I don't think, had even attempted a shot at goal in the first half. There was one stat I saw that said they had and it was off target. I can't personally remember it and I could be wrong. They were just, like I say, the smell probably reached everyone in the N17. It was that stinker of a performance. I suggested to Postecoglou after the game, the first question, as you know, I kind of often have to ask that because no one will do it. And I kind of asked, what do you take from that game? Do you take from the game the character shown at the end, the spirit to, snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat away from home? Or do you look at the flat performance that came before it, the really flat performance? Or is it kind of a mixture of both? And he did his kind of classic, I don't know. Flat performance is a bit harsh. I think it was a typical cup game. I thought Coventry were really good. They put some real energy into the game and we couldn't really get a grip on it. So we had to hang in there. We had to work really, really hard just to stay in the game. And obviously going a goal behind makes it even more challenging. But like you said, at the end there, we showed some real spirit and character, which is probably what's been missing in the first 4 games. We've had the performance, but we haven't had the relentlessness to get a result. But you sense in that last 10 minutes, we got real belief out of that. And hopefully that's a good sign moving forward. I agree with him that a lot of credit has to go to Coventry. Coventry were excellent. They were really good. Just didn't have that finishing touch, really, that would have probably put them out of sight. But I'm sorry, Ange. That Flat was being generous. They were rubbish. But obviously, I can't really say that the press conference was like, so your team were absolute garbage. Do you take that? You have to kind of couch it in slightly different terms. Otherwise, you just don't get an answer from managers in those situations. Timo Werner. He put in a performance that was so dreadful that when he went down injured in the 73rd minute, had he come off and Spurs had stayed with 10 men, I don't think you would have noticed any difference. He was that bad. He was just dreadful. And look, he might not be sharp. He definitely is lacking in confidence. You can see that. He lost the ball 3 times through poor touches. Didn't make a single key pass. Didn't make a single dribble. Didn't have a single shot at goal. His only contribution I can remember being a positive one was he made a sliding block in his own box from, I can't remember if it was a shot or a low cross across the 6-yard box. But even that, he kind of looked like he was injured afterwards as well. He just offered absolutely nothing to Spurs at all. Who scored player ratings? Who scored? You might have heard me mention them before. They do stat-based ratings, so everything within a player's performance that they do. It's not always the best indicator in terms of sometimes players do stuff that the stats don't show, but in this case, I think it was quite a good one. Werner had 5.64. He was the lowest score of any starting player on the pitch. I gave him a 2 in my player ratings because he just, like I said, he pretty much got the 2 because of that sliding block. He was just dreadful, and it's one of those where I'm hoping once he gets back from whatever this injury is that he picked up, I'm hoping he finds some confidence and sharpness again, because at the moment, I think we were talking about this, a lot of us in the press box and people in the club as well. I think his loan made sense in terms of what he had done in the Postecoglou system. He had shown that he could beat his man, get to the byline, pull the ball across, and that's it. For a loan kind of squad depth deal, it kind of made sense. But if he's going to put in performances like he has so far in his little cameos this season, then of course it becomes a dreadful deal. It becomes an absolute waste of a deal. I'm hopeful, based on very little at the moment, maybe based more on what we saw last season, that if he can find his groove again, that he'll end up being a useful player in like the European games and maybe late in Premier League games. But if he's anything like he was yesterday, then I don't know whether there'll be a break clause or not in January. Often, this is just me kind of guessing. Often the clause lies with the loaning club, the club the player has come from. I think you might remember with Tanguy Ndombele was it Fenerbahce last season. I'm sure they would have loved to let him go because he did nothing for them. But I think the deal was waiting on the Spurs side, and the Spurs were like, no. This is what I'm guessing. They're like, no, it's your problem. You have him. And I would imagine that's probably the case with Timo Werner, because obviously, I don't know. We'll see.